The hum of the airport was its own kind of symphony, rolling suitcases clattering over tile, announcements echoing through speakers, children crying, and the soft static of boarding calls. For the Thompson family, this trip was supposed to be a long-awaited getaway. Marcus Thompson, a hard-working father of two, had promised his wife, Danielle, that after months of long hours at the hospital where she worked as a nurse, they would finally take a family vacation. With their two kids, 10-year-old Eli and 7-year-old Naomi, in tow, they were headed to Orlando for a week of theme parks, sunshine, and laughter. As they reached the gate, Marcus smiled at his children's excitement. Eli clutched his toy airplane, buzzing it through the air, while Naomi twirled her pink backpack straps. Group B is now boarding, the gate agent announced. Marcus handed over their boarding passes. They moved down the jet bridge, the cool air rushing around them, a promise of adventure just beyond the door. Inside the cabin, a flight attendant in her late 40s, with sharp eyes and a clipped tone, greeted them stiffly. Her name tag read Ms. Carver. Her smile never reached her eyes. "Seats?" she asked curtly. "Row 14, Marcus replied politely, guiding his children down the aisle. As they walked, Ms. Carver's gaze lingered on them, her eyes narrowing slightly. Something in her look made Danielle shift uncomfortably, but she brushed it off. They settled into their seats. Eli pressed his nose to the window, Naomi fiddled with the tray table, and Marcus tucked their carry-ons neatly beneath the seats. Everything seemed fine until Ms. Carver returned. Ms. Carver leaned into their row, her voice low but firm. "Sir, your bag is sticking out. It's not properly stowed." Marcus bent down, pushed the bag further in, and smiled. "There we go. Thanks for pointing it out." But she didn't leave. Her eyes flicked to Naomi, who was bouncing in her seat. "She needs to calm down. Children must be seated and quiet before takeoff." Danielle frowned. "She's fine. She's just excited." Ms. Carver's lips pressed into a thin line. "Excited or not, disruptive behavior won't be tolerated." With that, she marched off, her heels clicking down the aisle. Danielle and Marcus exchanged uneasy glances. They had flown before with their kids, and never once had they been singled out like this. 15 minutes later, as boarding continued, Naomi asked for her headphones. Marcus helped her plug them into the seat screen. She giggled as a cartoon played softly. But Miss Carver reappeared, her expression sharp. "I told you, she must remain calm. That laughter is disturbing other passengers." Danielle's mouth dropped open. "She's laughing at a cartoon. She's not disturbing anyone." Heads turned nearby. A couple across the aisle frowned, clearly confused by the exchange. Miss Carver's tone rose slightly. "If this continues, I may have to request that your family be removed from the flight." The words landed like a punch to the gut. "Removed? For a child's laughter?" Marcus tried to stay calm. His voice was even respectful. "Ma'am, with all due respect, my daughter isn't being disruptive. She's just watching a show." But Ms. Carver's glare lingered, cold and unyielding. "Consider this your final warning." She turned sharply and walked away again. The tension was palpable. Passengers whispered among themselves. Some looked annoyed, not at the Thompsons but at Ms. Carver. Others avoided eye contact altogether, sinking into their seats. Eli whispered to his father, "Daddy, are we in trouble?" Marcus put a hand on his son's shoulder. "No, son, we didn't do anything wrong." But inside, his chest tightened. He could feel the weight of eyes on him, the familiar sting of judgment he'd felt in too many other places. Grocery stores, malls, even his own neighborhood. And now on a plane. Danielle's jaw clenched. "She's targeting us," she whispered. "You see it, don't you?" Marcus nodded grimly. "I see it." The final boarding call ended. Passengers buckled in, and the plane doors sealed shut. Marcus prayed that would be the end of it. But Ms. Carver returned, this time with another flight attendant trailing behind her. She folded her arms, her voice loud enough for half the cabin to hear. "I've received multiple complaints about your family's behavior. At this point, I will have to request that you deplane." Gasps rippled through the cabin. Danielle shot up from her seat. Complaints? From who? No one has said a word to us. Marcus rose too, his voice steady but firm. Our children are seated, buckled, and quiet. We've done nothing wrong. Ms. Carver's expression hardened. Sir, don't raise your voice. This is your last chance to leave voluntarily before security is called. The second flight attendant looked uneasy, glancing between Ms. Carver and the family. Maybe we should, but Ms. Carver cut her off. No, this family is being disruptive. They need to go. The cabin erupted into murmurs. A man in the row behind spoke up. They haven't done anything. The kids are fine. A woman across the aisle chimed in. Why are you singling them out? The support was unexpected but powerful. Marcus felt his chest swell. Not with anger, but with relief. People saw it. They weren't imagining it. But Ms. Carver's face turned red with fury. Everyone, please remain seated. This does not concern you. Danielle's voice shook, but she stood tall. Yes, it does. Because if you can do this to us, you can do it to anyone. The murmurs grew louder. More passengers nodded in agreement. And then the cockpit door opened. A tall man in a crisp uniform stepped into the cabin. His cap tucked under his arm. His presence commanded instant silence. His name badge read Captain Harris. What seems to be the problem here? His deep voice rumbled. Ms. Carver straightened, smoothing her uniform. Captain, this family has been disruptive. I've given multiple warnings, and they refuse to comply. I was about to have them removed. The captain's eyes shifted to Marcus, Danielle, and their children. Eli clutched his toy plane wide-eyed. Naomi sat quietly, her headphones around her neck. Captain Harris crouched slightly to meet Naomi's gaze. Sweetheart, are you okay? Naomi nodded shyly. Yes, sir. He looked to Marcus and Danielle. Has there been an issue? Marcus kept his tone measured. Captain, my children have been calm and seated. My daughter laughed at a cartoon, and my son's been quiet the whole time. We've followed every instruction. We don't understand why we're being targeted. Passengers around them spoke up. They haven't done anything. She's lying about them being disruptive. They're fine. It's her that's the problem. Captain Harris's jaw tightened. He straightened, his eyes fixing on Ms. Carver. Is that true? Did you fabricate passenger complaints? Ms. Carver stammered. And no, sir, I was only trying to maintain order. By threatening to remove a family without cause? His voice cut through the cabin like a blade. The silence was deafening. Passengers leaned in, waiting for his verdict. Captain Harris folded his arms, his expression firm. This family stays. If anyone is removed from this flight, it will not be them. Gasps. Applause. Whispers surged. Ms. Carver's face drained of color. Sir, I don't think. You don't have to think, Captain Harris said sharply. You have to follow procedure. And our procedure does not include discrimination. The cabin erupted in claps and cheers. Danielle's eyes filled with tears. Marcus squeezed her hand, his chest finally loosening. But deep down he knew this wasn't over. The flight might continue, but the weight of what had just happened would linger long after the wheels left the runway. The roar of applause still echoed as Captain Harris gave Marcus and Danielle a reassuring nod before returning to the cockpit. But the atmosphere in the cabin was anything but calm. Passengers buzzed with conversation, whispering about what had just unfolded. Some looked outraged on the family's behalf. Others shook their heads in disbelief, mumbling about how unfair the treatment had been. Marcus took a deep breath, trying to ease the knot in his chest. Danielle leaned toward him. Did you hear that? She whispered. He said this family stays. He saw it. He saw her for what she was doing. Marcus nodded. Yeah, but I don't think she's done with us yet. Danielle's eyes flicked toward Miss Carver, who now stood at the front of the cabin, her posture stiff, her jaw clenched so tightly it looked painful. She whispered furiously to another attendant, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. As the plane taxied onto the runway, Miss Carver returned to her duties, but her movements were sharp, almost hostile. When she came down the aisle with the safety demonstration, her eyes darted past Marcus's family as if they didn't exist. When the cart service began, Marcus noticed she skipped over their row completely. Danielle raised her hand politely. "Excuse me, could we have some water for the kids?" Miss Carver's tone was clipped. "We're out of water for now." But 2 rows back, another family requested water, and received it without hesitation. Danielle's eyes narrowed. "You see that?" Marcus nodded, his fists tightening against the armrests. "Yeah, she's trying to make a point. But we're not giving her the satisfaction." Eli tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, why doesn't she like us?" Marcus's heart clenched. He forced a smile. "Sometimes people don't understand others, son. But it doesn't mean we've done anything wrong. Okay?" Eli nodded slowly, though the confusion in his eyes lingered. A man from across the aisle, wearing a baseball cap, leaned over. "Hey, I saw what just happened. Don't let her get to you. If she tries anything else, you've got half this plane behind you." Danielle's lips quivered into a grateful smile. "Thank you. That means a lot." Soon, others began speaking up too. A woman a few rows ahead turned around. "If you need snacks or water, I've got plenty for your kids. Don't let her ruin your flight." The Thompsons were overwhelmed. Strangers, complete strangers, were rallying around them in quiet but powerful ways. It was as if the injustice had bonded the passengers together against a common enemy. And yet, Miss Carver continued her icy charade, shooting occasional glares their way whenever she thought no one was watching. An hour into the flight, turbulence rattled the cabin. The seatbelt sign flickered on, and flight attendants rushed to secure the galley. Miss Carver stumbled slightly, then shot a venomous glance toward Marcus's family, as if the turbulence itself had been their fault. When the shaking subsided, she stormed down the aisle toward their row. Her voice was harsh, carrying across the cabin. "Sir, your daughter had her tray table down during turbulence. That's a violation of safety protocols." Danielle gasped. "That's not true. Her tray table was up. I put it up myself." Naomi's lip trembled. "Mommy, I didn't touch it." Passengers began to murmur again. A woman directly behind the Thompsons spoke loudly. "She's lying. I was watching the whole time. Their tray table was up." Another man chimed in. "She's making things up to harass them." All eyes turned to Miss Carver. Her face flushed crimson. "Everyone needs to mind their own business." Marcus stood, his voice calm but commanding. "Captain Harris already addressed this. We are not violating any rules. And I won't let you intimidate my children." Cheers broke out again. Passengers clapped. Some even booed Miss Carver. Her composure cracked. "Fine. If the captain wants to play favorites, then so be it. But don't come crying to me when—" "Enough." The word cut through the noise like a thunderclap. Captain Harris had reappeared in the aisle, his expression stone cold. "Ms. Carver," he said firmly, "step aside." She opened her mouth, but he raised a hand. "I don't want excuses. I've received multiple reports from passengers about your behavior toward this family. This stops now." Ms. Carver sputtered. "Sir, with all due respect." "No. With all due respect, you are endangering the integrity of this flight. If you cannot perform your duties without prejudice, I will relieve you of those duties effective immediately." Gasps rippled through the cabin. "You can't do that," she snapped. His gaze hardened. "I'm the captain. I can, and I just did. Sit down in the jump seat. You are no longer serving passengers on this flight." The eruption of applause was deafening. Passengers cheered. Some even stood to clap. Danielle covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Marcus squeezed her hand, speechless at the sheer weight of the captain's words. Miss Carver stood frozen, her face pale with shock. Slowly, she turned and marched toward the front, collapsing into the jump seat with a furious glare. Captain Harris turned back to Marcus and his family, his voice softer now. "I apologize for what you've endured. My plane is no place for discrimination. You have my word. You'll arrive safely and with dignity intact." Marcus's throat tightened. "Thank you, Captain." He nodded once, then returned to the cockpit. The mood shifted dramatically. With Ms. Carver sidelined, the other attendants stepped up, treating Marcus's family with kindness. They brought water, extra snacks for the kids, and quiet reassurances. Passengers continued to offer support. Some leaned over to say how wrong the treatment had been. Others smiled warmly, as if silently saying, "We're with you." For the first time since boarding, Danielle finally relaxed in her seat. Eli and Naomi giggled at cartoons on the screen, their earlier fear fading into excitement again. Marcus, however, stared out the window, deep in thought. He couldn't shake the heaviness in his chest. They had been spared humiliation not because the system worked, but because one man, a captain, had chosen to intervene. What if he hadn't? That thought lingered like a shadow, even as the clouds outside gave way to sunlight. As the plane began its descent, the cabin lights brightened. The announcement echoed, "We'll be landing shortly. Please fasten your seatbelts." Passengers began to pack away their items, but the Thompsons weren't thinking about luggage. They were thinking about what awaited them once the wheels touched down. Would Ms. Carver face consequences, or would her actions be quietly swept under the rug? Marcus whispered to Danielle, "If this gets buried, she'll just do it again to another family." Danielle nodded, her jaw firm. "Then we won't let it be buried." Her words carried a quiet strength. Marcus realized this fight wasn't just about them. It was about standing up so others wouldn't have to go through the same ordeal. As the landing gear deployed with a thunderous thud, Marcus glanced around the cabin. He saw passengers watching them with supportive eyes. For once, he didn't feel alone in the struggle. The plane touched down with a jolt. The cabin erupted in claps again, not just for the landing, but for the family who had endured, and for the captain who had stood by them. But Marcus knew the real story was only beginning. The plane rolled to a smooth stop at the gate, the soft hiss of depressurization filling the cabin. Passengers unbuckled, standing and stretching, but no one seemed in a hurry to leave. The buzz of conversation was thick with anticipation. Everyone knew something more was coming. Marcus and Danielle exchanged a look. The kids clutched their backpacks, their eyes wide, sensing the tension in the air. The intercom crackled. Captain Harris's steady voice filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we disembark, I ask that you remain seated for a few moments. Airline officials will be boarding the plane to address a serious matter." The murmur of voices rose again. A few passengers nodded knowingly. Others whispered furiously, pointing toward the jump seat at the front of the plane, where Ms. Carver sat stiff and pale, staring at the floor. Two uniformed airline supervisors entered the cabin, their expressions stern but professional. One of them, a woman with a clipboard, introduced herself. "Good afternoon. My name is Ms. Langston. I'm the operations manager for this flight. I've been briefed by Captain Harris regarding a complaint of discrimination and misconduct on board." Gasps rippled through the cabin. Passengers leaned forward, eager to hear more. Ms. Langston continued, "We will be taking statements. If any passengers witnessed inappropriate treatment or discriminatory behavior, please remain on board and speak with us after disembarkation." A dozen hands shot up instantly. The other supervisor, a tall man in a navy suit, glanced at Ms. Carver. "Ms. Carver, we need to speak with you immediately." Ms. Carver stammered, her voice trembling. "This is ridiculous. I've done nothing wrong. They're exaggerating, twisting things to make me look bad." Passenger shouted from the back. "We saw everything. Stop lying." Others began nodding, murmuring in agreement. The atmosphere was electric, an entire cabin united against injustice. One by one, passengers stood to testify. The woman who had offered water to the Thompsons spoke first. She skipped their row during service and lied about it. "I was watching the whole time. That family was treated differently because of the color of their skin." The man in the baseball cap added, "She tried to kick them off the plane for no reason. The captain had to step in to protect them. That says everything you need to know." Another voice chimed in. She even lied about their child's tray table being down during turbulence. I was sitting right behind them. It wasn't true. She was trying to provoke them. Each testimony piled weight onto the growing mountain of evidence. Miss Carver's face grew redder by the second. She shrank into her seat, gripping the armrests as if they might anchor her against the storm crashing down around her. Finally, Captain Harris stepped into the cabin once more. The room hushed instantly. His presence commanded respect, his words steady and deliberate. As captain of this flight, I am responsible for the safety and dignity of every passenger on board. I personally witnessed conduct from Ms. Carver that violated both. Her repeated attempts to intimidate and harass this family were unacceptable. He paused, his eyes scanning the cabin. I made the decision to remove her from active duty mid-flight because I deemed her behavior a risk to passenger morale and safety. That is not a decision I take lightly. The silence was heavy, broken only by a murmur of agreement from the passengers. Captain Harris turned toward Ms. Langston, the operations manager. I recommend immediate suspension pending a full investigation. The cabin erupted in applause once more. Passengers clapped. Some even whistled. Marcus's heart swelled, not because Ms. Carver was being punished, but because accountability was being demanded, right there in real time. But Ms. Carver wasn't finished. She shot up from her seat, her voice shrill. This is absurd. You're all ganging up on me. I was just doing my job. If anyone's out of line, it's that family for causing trouble. Boos filled the cabin. Passengers shouted back. They didn't do anything. You targeted them. Stop lying. Danielle finally stood, her voice clear and calm, yet carrying the weight of everything they had endured. You tried to humiliate us. You tried to make us feel less than human in front of our children. But we're still standing, and you can't erase the truth. Everyone here saw it. Her words struck like lightning. The cabin erupted in applause louder than any before. Even the supervisors exchanged glances, resolute now. Ms. Carver slumped back into her seat, defeated. Ms. Langston approached Marcus and Danielle. On behalf of the airline, I deeply apologize for what you've endured. This behavior is unacceptable. We will ensure you are compensated, and we invite you to file a formal complaint. Your voices will be heard. Marcus hesitated, then spoke. It's not about compensation. It's about making sure this never happens to another family. Danielle nodded. We'll file the complaint. Not for us, but for everyone who can't fight back. The supervisors nodded solemnly. As passengers began to file off the plane, many stopped to shake Marcus's hand, pat him on the back, or hug Danielle. Some whispered encouragement to the children, assuring them they had been brave. One woman pressed a note into Danielle's hand. It read, "Thank you for standing strong. You gave us all courage today." By the time they exited the plane, the Thompsons felt drained but uplifted. They had been humiliated, yes, but they had also been defended, uplifted, and vindicated in front of a plane full of witnesses. Outside the jet bridge, reporters had already gathered, tipped off by passengers live posting on social media during the flight. Cameras flashed, microphones extended. Sir, is it true a flight attendant tried to remove your family? How did the captain respond? Do you feel justice was served? Marcus shielded his children with his arm. Danielle raised her chin. We'll share our story soon. For now, all we want is to get home. Captain Harris emerged behind them, fielding his own wave of questions. His words echoed above the din. I don't tolerate discrimination on my plane. Every passenger deserves dignity, no exceptions. Those words would become headlines by morning. That night, after the family finally made it home, Marcus and Danielle tucked their children into bed. The kids had been quiet, the weight of the ordeal pressing on their young hearts. But once they were safe, the relief of being surrounded by familiarity eased their spirits. Marcus turned on the TV, but he didn't have to switch channels to see what had happened. Their story was everywhere. Clips from passengers' smartphones were running on the evening news. Their faces blurred for privacy, but the voices unmistakable. Achiran scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Flight attendant accused of racial discrimination mid-air, captain intervenes. On social media, hashtags were trending. Hashtag flying while black. Hashtag justice in the air. Hashtag not on this plane. Millions were engaging with the story. Some were outraged, some relieved to see justice served, but everyone was talking about it. By the next morning, the airline had released a statement. We are aware of the incident that occurred on Flight 227. We take allegations of discrimination very seriously. The employee involved has been placed on immediate suspension pending investigation. We deeply apologize to the passengers affected and reaffirm our commitment to equality and respect for all. It was the right words, but Marcus and Danielle knew words alone weren't enough. The media pressed harder. Talk shows debated whether this was an isolated incident or part of a larger issue within the airline industry. Commentators pointed to similar past complaints, questioning whether airlines were truly addressing systemic discrimination. For once, the Thompson story wasn't buried. It had been caught in real time, witnessed by dozens, amplified by hundreds of thousands. While the family avoided the spotlight as best they could, updates about Ms. Carver flooded in. Anonymous sources revealed she had a record of complaints from passengers and even colleagues, though many had been dismissed in the past. This incident, however, had been too public to ignore. Within a week, the airline announced, effective immediately, Ms. Carver is no longer employed with our company. We will also be implementing mandatory diversity and bias training across all staff levels. The announcement was met with applause online. But the family knew the true victory wasn't in her firing. It was in the visibility, in the accountability. Captain Harris became an unlikely public figure overnight. Passengers praised his courage in standing up for the Thompsons. News outlets interviewed him, though he stayed humble. I didn't do anything extraordinary, he told one reporter. I did my job. My responsibility is to keep every passenger safe. Not just physically, but emotionally and with dignity. That's non-negotiable. His words struck a chord. In a world where silence often enabled injustice, his action, calm, decisive, unflinching, felt revolutionary. For Marcus and Danielle, the whirlwind of attention was overwhelming. At the kitchen table, Danielle sighed. I didn't want us to become some kind of symbol. I just wanted to get home with my kids. Marcus nodded. I know. But maybe our story can protect someone else. Maybe another family won't have to go through what we did. Danielle looked at him, her eyes softening. You're right. If telling our story keeps the light shining, then maybe it was worth it. That night, she drafted a statement for social media. We never asked to be in the spotlight, but we believe in truth. What happened to us is not unique. Families like ours experience bias every day in ways big and small. But silence allows it to continue. If our story inspires one person to speak up, to demand change, then our voices were not wasted. The post went viral. People from around the world commented, sharing their own stories of discrimination, offering solidarity, thanking the Thompsons for their courage. The hardest part for Marcus and Danielle was explaining everything to their children. Their son asked, Mom, why did she hate us? Danielle hugged him tightly. She didn't know us. She only judged what she thought she saw. That's her mistake, not yours. Their daughter, braver than her years, said softly. But the captain helped us, and all those people clapped. So maybe there's more good than bad. Marcus swallowed the lump in his throat. That's exactly right, sweetheart. There's more good than bad, and we hold on to that. Weeks later, the family boarded another flight, this time for a long-planned vacation. As they settled into their seats, they felt the stares of recognition from a few passengers. But instead of suspicion or hostility, they felt warmth, smiles, nods of respect. A flight attendant leaned down to Danielle and whispered, We've all heard your story. Thank you for speaking up. You made this industry better. For the first time since the ordeal, Danielle felt peace on a plane. The cabin door closed, engines roared to life, and as the aircraft lifted into the sky, Marcus reached for his wife's hand. They had been tested. They had been humiliated. But in the end, they had triumphed. Not with anger, but with truth. and that truth had traveled farther than any plane ever could. If the story moved you, don't let it stop here. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful true-to-life stories about justice, resilience, and the fight for dignity. Together, by keeping these conversations alive, we can push for real change.